I'm really having a long day and I can't think of the word. I'm going to provide some direction regarding some of the more vague areas of enforcement, and try to provide as clean a definition of what the intent of the law is from an executive order standpoint. But I don't think at this point that I'm entertaining any more non-signing it.
So does that mean you're going to send it back with your recommendations? Or?
No, I think that there are some items in the ordinance that either are discretionary or not defined necessarily the extent that I would like, but I think that can be handled in an administrative fashion rather than needing to be legislatively changed. It's similar to you'll have the RCWs and the WACs.
Right.
So in this case, this would from a metaphor standpoint, this would be similar to the WACs, where the underlying ordinance is passed, doesn't necessarily need to be changed, but there's some definitions and some clarifications that can be provided to spell out intent, so that the officers that are then are then trying to enforce it have clarity regarding what is enforceable, what isn't. There's some language in there about demonstrations. Mm-hmm. You know, it would be nice. I think there needs to be some definition along the lines of it specifies demonstrations, i.e., something you would get a permit for, like a parade or some sort of demonstration in right of way. Mm-hmm. But obviously, you can do demonstrations that aren't in the right of way. Are those demonstrations as referenced in the ordinance? Right. You know, those are things that I can hash out. This is my interpretation of that I am directing the department to utilize in making their decisions on enforcement. And if the council decides that they don't like my definition, then they could then further clarify. Right. But it's not necessarily a requirement. Yeah. So things like that. But at this point, I think that's kind of where I'm at from a decision standpoint.
Okay. Did you get a chance to review the constitutional arguments I made on May 9th, this council meeting?
You know, that's something I've kind of left up to legal counsel. I think there's several examples of similar ordinances in effect, and there's no case law that would indicate that those ordinances or this one, that those arguments necessarily have been supported by the courts.
Maybe not in Washington. There has been in Colorado,
there was
Connecticut.
Maybe outside of the Ninth Circuit.
Yeah.
But not necessarily in our jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Very liberal. Yeah. There was potentially one on a tangential subject regarding an exclusion of public right-of-way for camping.
Yeah.
And that was in Los Angeles, but that was settled prior to the decision being published, although the decision was made public in an unpublished format. And so that's kind of been used as a guideline of what the court might rule if a similar case were to come about, but it's not necessarily case law.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean.
So you're willing to roll the dice with Aberdeen being the first one to have it go to court?
You know, I think this is something that the council has pushed. This ordinance is something that's important to the city, and you know if that's their will, thank you. If that's their will, you know, I can see the merit in what they're trying to accomplish. And
yeah.
I think we can see where this goes. You know, I don't necessarily think that this is something that tramples on the Constitution as I believe others believe.
But have you looked at the Constitution, like, and the ordinance?
And I have, and again, I'm not a constitutional scholar, so
okay.
I work off the best legal counsel that I have available to me.
Okay.
Available, and you know, that's something. If somebody wishes to challenge it, that's their right, and you know, I support that right as well.
Well, we have a copy of the Constitution that we've highlighted, and
thank you.
Lily highlighted and took notes on some areas of the points that I made on May 9th. So if you could even just take a few minutes to look at it before you make that final decision to sign it.
Yep. Yeah, we have legal counsel on staff, and so we've reviewed that.
If you're the one who's going to be signing it, why don't you look at it?
I will. No, I mean, I'm just saying that I've reviewed my concerns with legal counsel, and there's also a lot of MRSC and several other organizations that help provide input on these sorts of things in terms of where the law stands and advice.
Yeah.
There's also AGL opinions and things like that could be requested or exist on topics similar. So
Sure.
there's a wealth of information to work off of.
Okay. But yeah.
Surveillance. Officer King just went by.
I definitely respect the right to protest and for you to have an opinion, and I don't necessarily hold mine to be the almighty one.
Right.
So I'm always open to input.
Yeah.
So I'm doing the best I can as much as we all are. So
Okay.
Yeah, so you're communicating. That's the best part.
All right.
You're
So what about
communicating.
freedom to assemble,
yeah, I think that there's a freedom to assemble. I think you're
Just-
exercising it right now.
but just not in a sitting or lying down fashion?
Well, no, demonstration is protected under the ordinance.
But
that we passed.
assembly, right? But that's a separate phrase in the First Amendment. So I mean, you can look at it, but assembly is a separately identified in the First Amendment. So sitting down and lying down,
Here he
even in a
comes.
group, is an assembly.
That's
coming out
something
from
I
the
look at.
mayor.
I think that's
Well, he's
probably
defending the mayor.
taking the freedom to assembly to a
Yeah.
point that's probably more than what's intended. I think freedom to assembly is barring people from maintaining an association rather than physically assembling in a certain space. There's no freedom to assemble on private property.
Right.
And
sure.
Right.
And there's definitely freedom for a public entity to restrict access to certain public properties as defined by the organization. There's plenty. There's a freedom to assemble in a park, but there might be a requirement for a permit, and you might not be able to do it when the park's closed. So there is an ability for the government to put restrictions on physical assembly, but not on who you're associated with.
Okay.
Sitting outside of like an actual park, sitting outside, waiting for like the opening hours, and I'm sitting on the sidewalk, I could get a ticket.
Potentially. That would be, if it rose to a level where an officer came and asked you not to sit there, and after that you refuse to cease, then yeah, it potentially could happen. I will mention that there are, I think, 13 or 14 benches throughout the downtown that are not part of the sit-lie. You're free to sit on those.
Right, yeah, they're the
There's
exemption.
also certain areas around, there's several bus stops and other areas where if somebody was waiting or otherwise
Yeah.
in an issue. So there's alternatives. I think there's the intent on this is to address loitering in a way that affects the use of our walkable district, and I think that's something that can be addressed without necessarily trampling on the Constitution. And I think it can be achieved with the ordinances as it was passed. Are you recording that?
I'm recording everybody. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. You're required by law to let people know that.
Well,
Not
we're
in
on
a public
sidewalk.
space.
If I was
Yeah.
in your house, I would need to do that. But since you're a public official and we're on a public sidewalk,
Yeah.
it's actually.
That's also the First Amendment, freedom of press.
Yeah.
But I did have a question about
there's a certain point where I have an expectation of privacy in that I
Not
have
in-
a camera apparent.
Yeah.
So it would be nice. It would be nice, and it would be a gracious thing to let someone know they're being recorded.
Yeah. Well, there's
I
cameras.
hear you.
There's cameras right here,
And
right?
they-
Yeah, and
camera.
there's a sign that says this area is being surveilled.
Right.
Okay,
So-
so then you're good.
I just think
Yeah.
it would be nice. It
Yeah.
would be a good courtesy.
Okay.
But
I hear you.
Yeah. But
yeah.
I had a question and I lost it.
trampling the Constitution was the last thing you said.
Yeah. So I know you've been looking at Facebook, and I've been watching Facebook.
Yeah, there's
and,
a lot of Facebook.
and there's a lot of meanness on Facebook. But
Yeah.
the thing I'm noticing is the majority of, well, it seems to be the majority of the people who are talking really loud or
Angrily?
are talking about the homeless. They're very specifically speaking about the homeless, and that this ordinance will get the homeless or the people without homes or the derelicts or whatever they're calling them off the streets. So what it sounds like to me is that this ordinance is specifically targeting the homeless to remove
I
them
think
because
that's
they're
definitely an
hurting.
argument that I would take if I was attempting to undermine the legality of this ordinance.
I mean,
So
because that would be
I mean-
Well,
unconstitutional.
that's
But-
not the position that we're taking. We're just saying that's the position that we're hearing from most
Right.
people.
Well, I think that's good. That's not the position I take either, and I'm going to be
Yeah.
very clear in any
Make sure that you heard that.
communication I have with law enforcement or the council regarding
Yeah.
that. I think that there has been a tendency on both sides for people to view this as an issue that is potentially targeting the homeless,
Yeah.
or is going to disproportionately affect the homeless. And I want to highlight that this is not targeting homelessness; it's targeting a behavior, and that
Okay.
behavior isn't necessarily an element of homelessness.
Okay.
And it's something that I think you could make the argument that that's the case, but then you're also making the argument that homeless are the only people that are engaging in this behavior, which I think is false.
What behavior specifically? Because that
Clarify.
go ahead. Yeah.
I mean, the same thing that's the whole purpose of the ordinance and the underlying intent of the law, which is to reduce loitering that obstructs use of our walkable district in the business improvement district of the downtown.
right. But
Which is just that. I think there's a feeling on both sides that, and I've seen it from people who support and don't support the ordinance,
yeah.
that the walkable district of our downtown is an area where if you have a sit-lie ordinance, you're going to disproportionately affect homelessness, which is those people also saying they believe that homeless individuals are the majority of the people engaging in that behavior, which I think is a reach from my experience.
Okay.
But-
So the behavior that's specifically being targeted is sitting or lying in entrances to businesses. Is that the problem area?
Sitting or lying in the rights of, particularly the sidewalks, which
Yeah.
are the walking areas, and it's just this idea in a lot of the complaints that we've gotten regarding people not feeling like they have free access of the walkable district of our downtown, which is what's specifically called out and is benefited by the downtown parking business improvement district. Is our walkable district of the downtown,
Yeah.
and it's people saying, because of this behavior, I do not feel comfortable walking in the downtown, and us receiving those complaints and then creating legislation to address that.
Did you guys log those? Is there a log of the complaints or anything like that?
I don't,
Record of it?
Would that be a question for them?
This is an area where I think that's something that now that the question has been raised, I think there's an ability for us to do that, and we will.
So in the past,
But I think
there
in
hasn't been.
general, if you look at legislation that's come out of a city of this size and with the restrictions we have, we don't necessarily have a data collection service that logs and generates those things. The data is available. We could generate the statistics.
Yeah.
At this point, we hadn't, but I think it's something that we will be doing, just because the question has been asked, and it's something that we can do, and we feel that it would be the benefit of providing information to the public.
Right. So
But it's not something that was necessarily generated. I think this was more from
Right.
an anecdotal and from a public input standpoint that was
Right.
done in a much more qualitative rather than quantitative manner.
So then, it could be said that the impetus or the drive behind this is coming from an anecdotal collection of data or a perceived impression of what the public's opinion is based off of a few potential complaints, rather than
I guess the question I'd ask
knowing
is,
volume.
would that make it unlawful for us to legislate on it?
Say that again.
Would that then make it unlawful for us to legislate on it?
The numbers of
Because-
complaints? I don't think the numbers of complaints makes it unlawful. I think the
see it as a red
Constitution,
herring.
the Constitution
I kind of
makes
see
it
it as a red
unlawful.
herring, to be honest.
Yeah. No, it just really shows how much, because the one thing that Tawny, the city council president, has said multiple times is, I've done my research, but then I think it's the Global 4 News guy that in her interview with him asked, okay, what about local research? How many complaints have you had? What's the nature of the complaints? What is that percentage wise, right? And she didn't have any of that information, so that really
No,
kind of throws
but again, that's a red herring because that's to say the information isn't available.
right.
And which it is. It is available for us to go back and look at how many complaints we actually received.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of complaints that we may have seen that are not necessarily data driven. It's not like there's a data point that we collect where we're logging some sort of interaction.
Yeah.
Potentially every time we see a complaint regarding that.
Yeah.
Or that all of those were immediate where it is logged. But I think again it gets down to the point of there's nothing illegal about having anecdotal evidence support legislation. And if you feel that that's not how legislation should be created, that's something as a voter you have the right to think about when you make a decision.
No, that's not.
But it's not
Yeah.
it's not a requirement of the Constitution that you can't legislate anecdotally.
No, I agree with you there, but I think that
And if
the
you're
purpose of the Constitution is to restrict the government, right, and to enumerate how the government is supposed to operate and the rights of the people, so that the government doesn't overreach and trample the rights of the people. And so if the people making legislation, trying to pass laws, no matter at what level of municipality, they must refer to the Constitution. And when I asked specifically Tawny, you may have seen the video that I posted, I asked her specifically, and it's the recording, I think Dave was in the room, like, well, actually you probably left, it was after the meeting ended. Did you review the Constitution when you were drafting these ordinances? And she said no. So if she's one of the main legislators, the one proposing this legislation, and she is not referring to the Constitution, then that's an issue, right? Maybe there's something that you can do to have a constitutional class for the council people.
Again, I think there's 2 points there. Yeah. One, you're asserting that your interpretation of the Constitution is the one that is correct, which I think is a lofty thing to subscribe to. And two, you're asserting that because Tawny didn't do a reference of the Constitution to make sure that nothing unconstitutional was being written in the ordinance means that nobody did it, which is a lofty thing. Well, it's not lofty. It's just
I'm not asserting that. I'm asserting.
You seem to be.
No. The question that led up to that was, did you take an oath to the Constitution? That I asked her directly, and she said yes. So that was the lead up to it. And then I asked her if she directly researched the Constitution, and she said no. So what I was drawing from that is, do you actually hold your oath in high regard? Like, what regard do you personally take your oath if you're not personally looking at the Constitution? Right?
Again, I think you're carefully wording that to make it reflect poorly on her view of her oath to uphold the Constitution. Because at a certain level, she's not a constitutional scholar either. She's not a legal professional, and there is a level of review that happens of these ordinances that we do take very seriously. And if it was raised by our legal counsel that some of these questions of constitutionality or otherwise were violations, that would be taken very seriously. And you're not taking that into account when you make comments about her potentially not holding that in high regard, because you have a very strong view of what you believe the Constitution says and doesn't say, and it's different than that of our legal counsel and our council members. And because of that, you feel that they're not upholding their oath to the Constitution. But what you're really saying is they don't uphold an oath to the Constitution as understood by you. And I think that's something that should be very important to you. And I think you have every right to protest and say that you have a correct interpretation and they don't. But I don't think it's a very.
Well, it's
I don't find it very kind
Okay.
to infer that somebody doesn't care about the Constitution and the overarching law of this country because they have a difference in interpretation. I think they have a freedom of that interpretation as much as you do.
I haven't made that statement. I've only asked the question if
you made a statement in our meeting where you said there are 5 reasons why this is unconstitutional. You named them off.
Yeah.
And that was based solely on your research. You did not reference something as far as I'm aware.
Okay.
So, and I've yet to see case law that upholds your interpretation. So again,
Well,
that's where I'm at.
If we send you case law, then will that help you with making your decision?
Yeah, I mean, if you sent me case law that said this is unlawful because the president ruled this, and you provided that, I would definitely review that, and I would have our legal department review that as well.
Did you get a copy of? I think we delivered several, about 14 copies of an article from Yale Law that cited case law. Did you happen to get one of those, or was it just the council people?
It might have been just the council people. I'd be happy to look at it. You did reference several cases that were outside of the district court, and it hadn't risen to the level of the Supreme Court, which wouldn't necessarily be case law for this district. But,
sure.
We still would be interested in what those courts have ruled.
Okay.
I can't, comment on how it would affect the decision, but ultimately I have until Thursday to sign. Otherwise, it comes into effect without my signature.
Right.
And at this time, I don't believe that I will be vetoing this.
Okay.
I think at this point I've come to a decision to sign, but I still have some work to do before that.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll try and find you some case law to send you. What's the best way to do that? Email? Or?
Email, mayor@aberdeenlaw.gov.
Right.
You can also call City Hall.
Okay.
And they can direct you to my voicemail.
Right.
Generally, I'm working all the time, so
Yeah,
I know.
Oh yeah,
Thanks
this is
for
a
the
baby. This is not anything dangerous.
Oh, baby.
They were probably wondering what was in my coat.